Good evening, everyone. In the interest of time, I'm going to get started. I am Nadine Finnegan Carr, Secretary of the Community Relations Commission. Our chair, Sheridan Todd Geary, is on his way. He is parking, so I apologize for us being about a minute and a half late with beginning. But it is 6:02 now too, and the hearing of the Community Relations Commission with the Department of Transportation is now called to order. Welcome. As I said my name. Commissioner, can you introduce yourself, and then we will go to those on the line.
Absolutely. Good evening. I'm Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Commissioners on the line, I see a few of you. I'm going to just start with who I see first. Hello, Commissioner Evangelista. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, Commissioner Evangelista.
Thank you. Commissioner Aliche, are you there?
Good evening, everyone. This is Commissioner Aliche. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I see we also have staff of the office and observers on our line today. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to those of you who are on Charm TV. In terms of opening statements, because I was not prepared to do the chair's role right now, which I should have known better. But in terms of opening statements, what we are concerned with the Community Relations Commission and hope to have a sense of is we've had numerous people who have spoken to us over the past 18 months about both positives and negatives that have to do with the Department of Transportation. And what we are looking to do with these hearings is not call anyone to the carpet or anything of that nature. The purpose of these meetings is literally so that we can have a better understanding of how our city agencies work. And how they are working better for the people, and to also, if noted, recommend how we can all work better on behalf of the people of Baltimore, the citizens that we all serve. To that end, as I see, we have members here from the Department of Transportation that will be able to provide opening statements today. The way we will work is that we will have those opening statements. They will do their presentation, and that will be then followed by any additional public comment from anyone present or anyone on the WebEx. Is it WebEx? Thank you. On the every virtual platform. Anyone that's on the WebEx who is of the public who has additional questions, that will be followed by inquiries of the commissioners ourselves and any closing statements from both sides. Does anyone have any questions about the agenda or how we will be proceeding today? Hearing none, we will just begin with opening statements from those of you representing the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. And if you could not only introduce yourself, but introduce any other members of your staff that you would have here with you. Thank you very much.
Hit the button. Good evening. My name is Corinne Johnson. I'm the Interim Director for the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. With me in person this evening, I have the Deputy Director for Administration, Letitia Gardner. Keena Overton is our EEO officer and equity officer as well. And then Valerie LaCour is the ADA Division Chief. And then online, I have Viobia Aquila, my Chief of Staff, as well as Nick Fontanez, the HR Manager, and Tavon Braxton, Deputy Director for Operations.
Thank you. Welcome to you all.
Thank you. Just waiting on pull the presentation up. All right, so we can get on into it. Go to the next slide, please. So just to give you a brief overview, our agency is focused on maintaining and improving the transportation infrastructure. We're focused on it being safe, reliable, accessible, and efficient, and that is for everyone. And so we are working to provide sustainable and different options for modes of transportation for our residents, businesses, and visitors, thereby promoting a livable and vibrant community across our great city. And so here's just a list of the various goals. We have a lot in our portfolio, everything from the roadways, the sidewalks, bridges and structures, our signals, our lighting systems, our conduit system, and so many other things that are encompassing within the transportation infrastructure. This slide just gives you an overview of our workforce demographics. You can see that we have about, it's hard for me to say there. We have about 60% male and 30, almost 40% female. The age breaks down to where there's the two pockets in that 29 to 48 and then the 49 to 63 age range. So, we've got some of our seasoned employees and we've got some that are a little more in the middle of their career. And then from a race demographic standpoint, you can see that we do have a high population of our African-American employees and then our white employees as well. We recognize that we need to work on targeting additional females and whites, and also other ethnicities such as Hispanics, Asians, and American Indians. So, and then just down there at the bottom, you see that we have over 1,000 employees, and there are the various divisions. And although it doesn't call it out, the EEO officer and ADA, they fall within administration. So that's where they're housed. So we collaborate with the city's Department of Human Resources to attract qualified applicants to fill our vacancies. We use both AI and machine learning technology of the city's new portal Workday. And from this, we can generate a pool of diverse applicants, excuse me, streamlining the hiring and promotional process and offering trainings to suit personal and professional growth. The AI aspect is being used to reduce the time spent recruiting new employees by automating some of those manual tasks. It has also streamlined the ability to recruit through multiple platforms, such as LinkedIn and Twitter, in addition to streamlining onboarding processing, such as verifying employee documents and conducting the initial training. Our recruitment and diversity efforts focus on widening our recruitments using various social platforms such as Twitter and Facebook, and collaborating with community organizations that target our demographic population to attract a diverse population. DOT ensures diversity amongst our interview panels for all of our interviews. Excuse me, I've got some allergies going on. And DOT engages with DHR on special hiring events like one we had recently here at the War Memorial Building, and reaching out to various communities throughout the city. We are prioritizing diversity in our onboarding process by reviewing policies and procedures per the administrative manual, for example, the anti-discrimination, sexual harassment, Title VI, and EEO policies. Potential candidates and current employees are offered opportunities to engage in self-led courses that include equity, diversity, and inclusion content. And additionally, customer services and developing emotional intelligence are some of the other training opportunities available. And then finally, we work on educating our management on the benefits of diversity in the workplace. And so we are committed to providing mentoring, coaching, and encouraging diversity and growth for high potential employees who may desire and need required skills to help them achieve personal and professional goals. And just to say, over the years, that has been one of my personal goals, is to pour into people and provide training and opportunities. All right, so on this slide, it's just showing some of the different factors that kind of fall into what we're doing and how it falls into the equity lens. As far as ensuring transparency, community involvement, internal, external collaborations, we strive to be clear and concise about who we are as an agency, what we are doing within the communities of Baltimore City, and the purpose of why we are taking various actions. And so we do engage with the community and various agencies. Our public engagement efforts include hosting public meetings throughout the life cycle of construction projects and initiatives, canvassing targeted neighborhoods with flyers or mailers, reaching neighborhoods through partnering organizations such as Blackmore and Blast emails, and then having vending at local festivals and events like the upcoming AFRAM. For quality assurance, DOT works proactively to analyze our internal processes to ensure we are aligned with standards and procedures. And our newly hired organization change manager is currently tasked with reviewing divisions' SOPs for improvement and uniformity, and also identifying areas where we don't have those SOPs that we then need to develop them and create some consistency throughout the agency. Acknowledging disparities, we are cognizant of historical issues of inequality and bias with different aspects of our operations. And so we're working actively through training and restructuring of operations to diminish that bias. Building and fostering diverse teams. We represent a diverse makeup of team members from all cultures, educational and work experience backgrounds. We believe that in our diversity, this encourages collaboration and breaks down barriers that prevent talented employees from thriving within their careers. Next, we'll go into the Civil Rights Division. You can continue. So I'm one where I don't like reading a lot of words that are up on the slide. So just to give you the overview for the first section is basically saying that we are committed. We are committed that no person shall on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, as provided by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 87 be excluded, divide, or denied any benefits, and so on and so forth. So the Civil Rights Division is responsible for upholding those local and federal civil rights laws and addressing and reducing disparities. They provide oversight and compliance, monitoring for DOT's local and federal programs. That includes on-the-job training, our DBEs, MPEs, WBEs, Title V, Title VI, and contractor compliance. And so the goal is to diminish and remedy ongoing acts of discrimination and create fair and equitable opportunities for those that we serve. This is just a image screen just saying that we are committed to diminishing discrimination and ensuring equity to all services and initiatives that we provide. And some of those services are our Complete Streets Ordinance that emphasizes redefining our approach to the city's transportation and landscape, which emphasizes priority of pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users. And then efforts are designed to increase the quality of life and mobility overall for Baltimore City. And some other examples of these include our Charm City Circulator, which provides free shuttle services throughout the city's central business district, offering a convenient, reliable, and eco-friendly form of public transportation for free, and also Bike Baltimore initiative to work on improving the city's biking infrastructure. So of course, there are going to be complaints, and so this is how we handle them. First off, any members of any specific classes or minority groups or anyone who feels that they've been deprived of an opportunity to participate in any program, any service or activity sponsored by DOT has the right to file a complaint. And so we receive these from different means as shown there, mail, email, phone call, different methods. All accusations are treated as being serious, of the utmost seriousness, and we conduct very thorough investigations. We make every effort to preserve confidentiality to the maximum extent feasible. Our policy on EEO ensures that retaliation and harassment are strictly prohibited and communicated to individuals involved. And our complaint forms are available and accessible and can be requested and submitted at any time. And the form is available on our website. This is just a screenshot overview of some of the different type of complaints that we receive. And we'll talk a little bit later about reasonable accommodations and discrimination, things like that. But this is just a simple overview. So this lays out our the process for our investigations. For each complaint we receive, the agency uses it as an opportunity to self-reflect and improve, and examine how we can improve our internal and external relationships, and recognizing there's always an opportunity for growth. In our data from fiscal year 22, there were 3 sexual harassment cases investigated, but they were unsubstantiated. There were 2 age discrimination cases investigated. There was 1 religious one, unsubstantiated. 7 gender equality that were investigated and unsubstantiated, and workplace harassment, again, 6 and unsubstantiated. We've been working closely with DHR. They've been instrumental in assisting our agency with training to provide workplace behaviors To address workplace behaviors that fail to align with our mission, standards, and procedures, we're increasing our training opportunities by instituting mandatory training that focus on customer services and managing diverse teams. In addition to providing training, we have recently been examining our facilities and have started updating restrooms to be gender inclusive by converting a public restroom to be gender neutral, for example. This is just a snapshot of fiscal year 22 of some of the different example complaints that were received. All of these, again, were unsubstantiated and were thoroughly investigated.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. I just want clarity before you move on.
Okay.
Were these complaints of the public towards transportation, or was this within ranks?
You all know about that? They were all internal.
Thank you.
Okay, reasonable accommodations. So we adhere to the administrative manual 305 reasonable accommodations policy. So staff can reach out directly to our civil rights division, DOTs, HR, or their supervisor to initiate that process. This is collaborative and interactive, and so obviously the supervisor is going to be engaged in trying to figure out what we can do to assist. Confidentiality is maintained with those interested parties, and the request is individualized. Additionally, we have public requests for ADA accommodations, and they're submitted for services such as language interpretation, translation, hearing and mobility services, and then and those are coming through with our civil rights email, our ADA compliance division, potentially also our community engagement team. So wherever they come through, they're still being routed to the appropriate staff for handling. Just to name a few, some of our sources for guidance and regulations include the Title V manual, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise guidance, and ADA, for example. Okay. So we are committed to providing resources and training opportunities to our staff to improve equality and inclusion in the workplace. We have collaborated with DHR to provide several trainings, such as sexual harassment, ADA, LGBTQIA, customer service, building trust, and we are working to provide new and refresher trainings on an annual basis. Now we'll transition into our ADA division. Excuse me one moment. So the City of Baltimore, we are committed to meeting the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits the discrimination against individuals with disabilities. In cases where pedestrian facilities are not accessible, we are committed to making reasonable accommodations to ensure accessibility. It was in 2021 that the department established the ADA Compliance Division to oversee and manage compliance with Title II of the ADA of the Americans with Disabilities Act in the city. This division is responsible for ensuring that pedestrian infrastructure in both private and public projects within the city's public right-of-way meet those ADA standards. This division consists of a division chief, who is present today, 4 full-time engineers who are dedicated to the design, engineering, construction, and inspection of pedestrian infrastructure. In addition to our core staff, we have also hired and employed 4 college interns who assist in researching best practices for ADA compliance under Title II. The staff of the ADA Compliance Division maintains professional relationships and collaborates with the Mayor's Office of Equity and Civil Rights staff. This collaboration ensures a coordinated effort in promoting accessibility and addressing any issues related to non-accessible pedestrian facilities. And through their work, the ADA Compliance Division aims to ensure that all residents and visitors of the city have equal access to pedestrian infrastructure in line with the principles of the ADA. Thank you. Residents may request an accommodation for pedestrian facility by several methods, including email, phone, letter, or in person. DOT is currently updating our website to improve communications to our community of those persons with disabilities. The ADA coordinator contacts the individual to discuss the request and determine if a reasonable accommodation can be made. In addition, we also have our 311 system. Residents can use this to report concerns at identified locations that involve curb ramps. And these requests are forwarded to the ADA Compliance Division for review and resolution as well. But if an accommodation is made, included in that 311 request, then the ADA coordinator does get involved and contacts the individual to discuss the request and see if an accommodation can be made. Regarding complaints for inaccessibility, if the complaint involves a request for service or repair in the public right-of-way, a complaint can be submitted through the 301 system. It will be then routed to the appropriate division for initial review, investigation, and resolution. If an issue cannot be resolved or responded to within a reasonable time frame after submitting a 301 service request, the complaint may submit it to the DOT ADA coordinator for additional review and engagement. Anyone who believes that they may have been discriminated against by the city based on a disability has the right to file a grievance against the city. This can be filed by contacting the department's ADA coordinator. Grievances are submitted to the Baltimore City Office of Equity and Civil Rights and under Title II of the ADA, to the Federal Highway Administration and the Maryland Department of Transportation, State Highway Administration for monitoring of a resolution. Quick overview here. This is our active stats as of today within the ADA division. So we have no grievances. We do have 10 complaints that we're working on, and there are 50 accommodation requests. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much, Director Johnson. I'm actually going to turn the imaginary gavel over to our chair. I'll allow him to introduce himself, and then we will move forward.
Director Johnson, good evening.
Good
Thank
evening.
you for your presentation and the detail. I'm Todd Yeary. I chair the Community Relations Commission and work with my colleagues, and so we are certainly appreciative of the effort put forth to make the presentation tonight. I guess before we get into the substantive questions from members of the commission, as you are in a non-permanent role, at least at this point, are there concerns that you have seen that might inform areas that we may want to have further conversation around? What are the needed areas of improvement from your perspective in terms of where the department is?
Got it. Well, what I can say is that I've seen that there have been clear processes. There's been, as far as I can tell, clear communication regarding our handling of situations. Sometimes employees might have confusion over the process, and so maybe we need to work on just trying to do a little bit more education with that. And then also, as far as our external customers, Valerie's been very diligent in working with me, and we've created some very clear processes, and those timelines will be followed. We're tracking everything, and so we're providing all those communications, meeting in person with individuals or having phone calls, whatever is needed to try to resolve or address some of those reasonable accommodations and things like that. So I can't say there's anything glaring right now. Yes, I am, still in this interim role, but thus far, I'm seeing some real good positives and diligence with the team.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to open the floor up now for, I guess, conversation with members of the commission. I see Commissioner Evangelista and Commissioner Lecce on the screen. Commissioner Johnson is here, as is our very able Secretary, Commissioner Finnegan Carr. Commissioner Johnson, I know you've been taking copious notes, so let's start with you if there are any questions that you have for Director Johnson.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for presenting to us today, Director Johnson. I was looking over the notes, and then I went to the cell phone to look at the website, and I see that you joined the department not even a couple of years ago, about a year and a half into the job. So thank you for stepping to the plate in this role. I know it's So you joined Deputy Director for Complete Streets, Chief Engineer, and then some changes happened, and you're now in this role. So I know it hasn't been an easy transition. So thank you, and thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
A couple of things I wanted to try to understand better. When you were presenting on your data earlier about your demographics, and what are your targets for the groups? Do you have any strategic targets laid out? I was looking for a strategic plan and couldn't find it easily. So I was wondering if you had strategic targets for the areas you identified as challenges that you would like to address.
Yeah, so at this point, there aren't any official strategic targets. As you can imagine, getting it still kind of new in the role and not fully permanent in the role. I've been working on making some improvements in general areas throughout the agency, but haven't necessarily established that full plan. I know we've been having some recent conversations about our recruiting efforts and ways to attract and hire more Hispanic, Latino communities. And so we've had some conversations with that just recently, but we haven't laid out a plan yet. So there's a lot that we're talking about right now because, again, it's all kind of new for me, but it's not laid out yet.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that. No, and now because I was looking, I was like, maybe I may have missed something. I have two more questions. One is going to deal with if someone has a complaint with the Department of Transportation and goes to your website, where do they find information on that? And I'm asking not as a trick question,
Okay.
but because there's a landing page and there are these bubbles for traffic advisories, Charm City Circulator. And I didn't see anything that was obvious if you have a complaint or concerns, kind of bubble there that would, from a wayfinding perspective, it could be maybe your complaints are lower because it may not be as easy to, and I'm a resident of the city, I didn't know that, call 311 or something to file a complaint. But if I went to the website and there was something more obvious, that would be helpful. And I didn't know if you had it on there and it was just a matter of just making it easier for people to find it.
Got it. I don't know that I can map it and tell you exactly where it is. Can either of you all speak to that? I mean, I know that we are working on making some website changes. There's other things that, as I've tried to go through and navigate certain things, I've brought up certain matters, and overall, we're trying to do a revamp of the website. So definitely that's something that would be included in those enhancements. But if,
It's just the updates to the website that is currently taking place, as well as we have our DOT civil rights.
Yeah, you're gonna have to step up. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Hi, good evening. I'm Keena Overton, and we are currently making updates to our website to streamline the process. But we do have our DOT civil rights email address where complaints can be submitted directly to us through the email.
Yeah, and I understood that from the presentation earlier. It was just a matter of, if I'm a concerned citizen, how do I find my way to making a complaint, or do I have to do searches to try to, figure out how to do it? And it's just, there's a lot of great stuff here. I'm like, oh, wow, there may be a button here to just make it easier. And that could just be an opportunity.
Yeah.
And my last question deals with training that you mentioned. And how do you, I want to understand, how do you sort of evaluate the effectiveness of it? I get that there are not substantiated complaints or grievances, however sort of your process works. But if there are some being made, there is some indication that there's more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 employees that are concerned. So then how are you evaluating the effectiveness of the trainings, and what are employees sort of sharing with you as feedback on how well they think the training may be helping with the environment?
Yes, so we do take surveys from participants of the training to gauge and get feedback. In addition to the complaints that are received, we use that as an opportunity for learning and to reevaluate our processes and how we engage with our staff members, as well as improving the relationships between employee and managers. So we will have instances where we may need to have a refresher course or refresher training on policies and procedures, because sometimes staff members may not understand the parameters within policies and procedures that we just need to do a refresher on. And oftentimes as well, we use the help of mediation with DHR to try to clear some of those misunderstandings.
not to be mean, because I'm a
Yes.
very nice person when I'm not sitting up here, I promise.
Okay.
But what are the employees' thoughts about it, right? Because you're doing training, there's oftentimes we think, oh, training is always the answer to an issue, and it is if it helps, right? If it helps move the needle on whatever the targeted attitude or behavior is. But you really only know that from either you think complaints are going down or employees are saying, oh my goodness, this is like the best training since sliced bread, 5 So I want to understand that, because if you have not considered it, maybe looking for ways to try to better get at how well the training is working from the employee's perspective. And it could be an opportunity to make it more meaningful for them to get the kind of, cultural results you're looking for.
And with the with the trainings that are given, we have tried different approaches where we will have separate trainings for managers and then ones for frontline staff, because sometimes frontline staff feel more comfortable expressing and sharing their instances without having sort of the oversight of the managers present during those trainings.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Evangelista, I see you on the screen. Want to call on you now if you have any questions for Director Johnson.
Just have a comment. Hello, everyone. I just want to thank you for the Department of Transportation. I did get the opportunity to peruse the website and some of the various initiatives that you are doing to implement diversity, equity, inclusion is applaudable. But I do not have any questions, Chair, except for the comment that I'm hoping that with the 40% gap for women in this particular agency, that we can find some kind of way to mitigate that from 60% for men and only 40% for women. And I'm hoping as you continue your tenure in role and hopefully become permanent, we'll be able to implement some type of strategy to kind of mitigate that gap between 40 and 60% as it relates to women.
No, I appreciate that comment. And just so you're aware, I personally, for over about a decade now, I've been, for example, a mentor with WTS Baltimore's chapter of Transportation U, which is a mentoring program for high school girls at Patterson Park High School. And so, or Patterson High School. And our goal is to introduce them into transportation careers. And so since being in this role, even in the past couple months, I've had numerous speaking engagements with WTS, with the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association, and doing like a women's event and talking more about careers in transportation. I'm finding where, one, I'm just trying to build connections and get the word out there. I think sometimes it's a matter of exposure. And then recently started, just by fluke, ran into someone who works with an organization that tries to bring in and train up young women and get them into some of those STEM type of careers. And so I said, look, let me get your number. We need to connect. We need to talk, because I want, if you need a mentor or need someone to come and speak, let me know. And then I can try to pour into them, but also let them know what careers exist here within the agency as well. So some of that effort is really just kind of getting out there. And then whenever I have been going to some of those events, I've been bringing some of my staff with me. So I brought someone recently from our construction team, so woman in construction, an inspector, and someone in conduits and elsewhere. And so I've been trying to kind of get out there and make that presence known. And that's helping, because someone sees and says, hey, there's someone who looks like me who's in this career. So that's some of what I'm personally just kind of about. But yes, we are internally talking about ways that we can do better recruitment in those areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, Commissioner Lecce is on. Just want to make sure I give you an opportunity to raise any comments or ask any questions you might have. All right, we'll take a pass and come back again. Commissioner Finnegan-Carr, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Uri. Thank you again, Director Johnson, for your presentation. I have a few questions that are sprinkled through different parts of your presentation, just for clarification for the public and for us as a commission. Beginning with the first or second slide, when you were discussing your goals for the agency, and the list is immense, to say the least. And of course, there's overlap with other city agencies with some of the, like some of the things overlap with Department of Public Works, I'm sure, and there's coordination involved. Are there targets and timelines for some of those events that are, or items that are listed as your goals, and where would we be able to find those?
So as a part of our annual budget process, which we just went through, there are certain performance measures and things listed in there for each of the different service areas. There are certain targets and goals and things like that. So that is all available online through the city's budget, BMR, website. Outside of that, we also have our Complete Streets ordinance and manual, so we do an annual Complete Streets report as well. So we kind of report out on our progress made and throughout the year or on an annual basis. I think those are the two main areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. The next question I have is specific to your ADA compliance request. What is the average time for those requests to be completed if someone has a request for an ADA compliance issue?
So complete is a little bit different. So I'll let her talk through the investigation process because
And that
the
would be helpful,
completion
yes.
can vary based on the type of
Right.
Yes.
So I'm Valerie LaCour, Chief of ADA Compliance. If we're talking about the accommodation requests, when those come in within 3 days, we do get with the person who's made the request to understand the need. Sometimes it's a simple resolution where we make a repair, either to an existing ramp that is unusable, to make it less hazardous, while we look for or engineer the permanent solution. Other times it's a request from, for example, a homeowner who now needs to be able to access the parking lane of the street, and they don't live at the corner. They sort of live in the mid-block. And what we do is we try to design a new ADA ramp in front of their home that fits in with the neighborhood. And usually it can take anywhere 6 to about 15 months, depending upon the constraints of the location. And in the meantime, we try to find a temporary solution because we want people to have access to either the MTA mobility vans or to private vehicles, or just to be able to get out into the neighborhood. The city has a lot of constraints, a lot of old infrastructure. So my job as the ADA coordinator is to help the person making the request understands that it can take a little bit of time, and then we try to work with them to make sure that they're able to get out and get access to where they need to go while we are trying to make that permanent solution.
Along with those requests, you mentioned like curb ramps and things of that nature. Are there other types of ADA-related requests that come from the public on a regular basis?
Sure. One of the biggest things is obstructions in the sidewalk. So an obstruction is anything that doesn't let you walk down the sidewalk or makes it more difficult for you to walk down the sidewalk. Most people think of poles, but you can also have vertical lifts in the sidewalk. And if it's greater than 1/4 of an inch, it can make it difficult for someone in a walker or wheelchair to be able to get down the sidewalk. And so what we try to do is, number one, we want to make it temporary repair so that you can use the sidewalk. It may not be the most attractive thing, but then we can engineer and through our maintenance programs, rectify those obstructions so that you can get from your house to where you need to go.
And how involved is, and I'm not sure if this is you or you in this particular question, how involved is the department as a whole when it comes to ADA requests for new construction, or when people are doing new construction? I know, planning and all of that might be a part of that. And the reason I ask is because, we have several buildings, several new construction, both city related and, developer, that are being put in, and they don't seem to always comply with ADA in the way they, put a sidewalk in after they've built their buildings and things of that nature? What parts of that fall under your purview and what parts of that are, they have to be remediated afterwards with a complaint?
So all new permits, and that includes capital projects with DPW, Rec and Parks, any capital project and any private development project. Before a permit to temporarily use the right-of-way, which is how you do construction in the right-of-way, it has to go through an ADA review. And my staff are very diligent for these new permits and these new capital projects to make sure that they are compliant with current ADA standards. And that includes the sidewalk, the curb ramps, and on occasion, pedestrian signals and other signalized intersections. There are legacy projects that were approved. They're usually capital. They were approved several years ago. And the standards within the city are being changed to make sure that we are meeting the ADA requirements. Any project that is over 12 months old requires a new ADA review from my staff, and no permit or construction set will be signed by the director unless she sees my initials that it has gone through an ADA review and that we're satisfied with the construction details.
Great. Thank you. I actually appreciate that as someone who has had issues with construction that may have been done prior to 12 months ago, and curb ramps that lead to cobblestones, which actually don't help.
That brings up just one little point. So when you bring up cobblestones, we do have some very historic sections of the city.
Which is different.
They're designated historic, and those cobblestones a lot of times are in those historic districts. They are not compliant. The street itself with the cobblestones are not compliant. And we work very closely with CHAP over in the Department of Planning. We don't want to destroy the character of the city and destroy our neighborhoods. So we are working on possible solutions to be able to maintain some of those materials, but also to make them more accessible.
Agreed. And I think some of them are not necessarily CHAP issues. They're issues, for example, I can picture the rotunda where new construction and they added cobblestones. So, but I'm happy to hear about that. I have two more questions, if you would permit me, sir. Thank you. Transportation is kind of my questionable thing all the time. One is with relation to the Charm City Circulator. You mentioned that the focus of that is on the Central Business District. It is my understanding as well that the routes are to be prioritizing the neighborhoods with the highest percentage of households that don't have cars, close gaps in those places where MTA buses currently don't cover. What kind of progress has been made in that issue? Because I know that there are some routes of the circulator that go to areas where, it's 70% or up of people have cars, where there are still areas of the city that are not reached by either the circulator or Maryland Transportation. So if you could speak on that.
Yes, so we did work through a transit development plan, the TDP. And with that, we identified a route to be established for Cherry Hill. And so we haven't formally put that out there. It will be and then also once it is formally out there and saying this is the final plan, it's going to take, of course, time to change the routes and establish the new stops and everything like that. So we are focused on that. We're also looking at working with Baltimore Peninsula to identify specific locations for some of those stops with the whole development in that area. For example, we've identified potential bus stop locations in Cherry Hill and South Baltimore, and also areas of East Baltimore. We, of course, have the Old Town Mall area that's being developed, and so looking for areas in there as well. We've also requested some funds to implement the TDP, including bus stops in low vehicle ownership areas. So we are, I think, fully trying to address those concerns and make sure that transportation is accessible, and especially this is free transportation that is hitting those neighborhoods where it needs to go.
Okay, and then my last question is with relation to your recruitment, your diversity and equity specific to recruitment, and going back to your statement about making sure that you do more outreach to women. What are your policies with relation to returning citizens, especially women who may have been incarcerated, but for not necessarily felonies, but for lower level crimes? Is there outreach specifically to that population?
So I don't think there's any specific outreach. I don't know if Nick is able to unmute and potentially answer any questions about HR policies for that type of recruitment effort. We'll give him a minute and see if it's feasible.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I was going in and out. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes, I was asking specifically to, in terms of improving the numbers of women, if there's specific recruitment and outreach to our returning citizens, our women who may have been incarcerated, but not necessarily for felonies.
Yes, we've actually historically used, we're a second chance employer, so we have used those recruiting services. I can think of at least 2 different places we've looked. We haven't specifically looked for women, to be honest with you, but we do try to utilize our second chance partners to kind of re-engage anybody incarcerated back into the workforce. That's definitely something we can look into.
Thank you. I have no more questions, Chair Gary.
Thank you. There is, I think, one question from the community. Rhonda, I see your hand up. If you're able to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, how are you? I do have several issues I'd like to raise, and they're all connected to the disability community, specifically the IDD, developmental disability community, which legislation was passed in 2022, Self-Direction Act, which will allow individuals with IDD to leave group homes and assisted livings and come into our community. I have more of a statement than a question, because since October 2022, and I live on a city block in the Ashburton community, 3500 block of Whitechapel, that has been blocked 8 times. So that means staff has not been able to reach their clients because the Department of Transportation has not due diligence and reached out to the residents in the Ashburton community when streets are being closed. And this has been something that's been raised with Valerie LaCour, DDA. It's continued. The street has been blocked 8 times. The water has been turned off 3 times. There, without any notification. There are 90,000 disabled people in Baltimore City. And I guess I do have a question. I would like to know what type of outreach the Department of Transportation is doing for the disabled community. That was a question.
Okay, yeah. So getting into, I think, and I'm somewhat familiar with maybe what you're referencing. I think it's not specifically a DOT specific project. There's been many different entities out there, some utility work out there. I think she mentioned some water work as well. So there's different communication procedures. I can speak to what we do within DOT for our projects. So there's different, excuse me. So it really depends on the classification and the extent of the work being performed. So if we have major projects with planned or scheduled work, then we have a different set of requirements for the communication and engagement before that construction can start. If DOT has to address an acute issue, something that's an emergency, then we do have those emergency road closures. Whenever we have like an emergency situation, most times we are notifying council members. If we have any key neighborhood association neighborhoods, someone, we might put that out there to them. We also use social media to put up notifications regarding it. We also, let me see. So the engagement team frequently also communicates with the residents about DOT initiatives via email and phone calls. So again, that's some more of that plan type of work. Sometimes mailers are sent to occupants or flyers are distributed. It just depends on the type of the project. We also have DOT public meetings. Those are held both in person and virtually. And when we held them in person, we make sure we're selecting a location that is going to be accessible. We also send pertinent information to elected officials for them to also share on their platforms via social media, in print, or other electronic newsletters for their listservs. Our engagement team attends community resource fairs, festivals, and pop-ups to share information with stakeholders in a more of an informal setting about any projects that are upcoming. And then we also have our road closures and traffic modifications resulting from utility work that is communicated. So there's a lot of times if there's like certain major impacts and things going on the weekends, we have traffic notices to go out as well. I mean, I think that pretty much hits on the whole full gamut of it. If there's something DPW related, they have their communications team. So they are pushing that information out. Same thing if it's some of the other utility providers or someone else out there doing work, that goes out as well. And then of course routinely there will be different other people working within the city's right of way. So it just really depends on the type of project.
Rhonda, I see your hand up. I got a follow-up real quick, and then I'll come back to you. To that point, Director Johnson, when there are projects that kind of overlap city agencies and departments, is there coordination around the communication to the affected areas, or is each department independently responsible for communicating about its particular portion of a project that may have some continuity or some overlap?
So no. So for example, if DOT had a streetscape project, and as a part of that project, we have conduit work, and we have a water line relocations and things like that. We're doing the engagement and communications for that overall project and the timeline and what to expect, things like that. If there is a standalone DPW project, then they're handling those communications. Or if there is a BGE project, the 4KV project, then they're handling those communications.
So coordinated projects, you're the lead communication coordinator.
If it is a DOT specific project, then yes, we're handling those communications.
All right, so I want to make sure I'm clear. When you say it's a DOT specific project, so let's say there is a public works part of the project that's going to require some disruption to the street. And there's going to be a DOT portion at some point once Public Works finishes their portion. So who communicates that?
Okay, let me rephrase and give a different scenario. So for example, if we have a bridge project that we're replacing and there's a water line attached to the existing bridge, that water line has to be replaced, relocated because of the bridge project. So that is that DOT-led project. And so when they're doing the water work and other things like that, our community engagement team is pushing out information about that. But if there is a DPW water main project, okay, so they're just doing their work, they're replacing it, doing repairs on it, and as a part of their work, their restorative work, they have to then also rebuild the roadway, resurface it, and do all that as part of that project. That is all DPW.
Gotcha.
And they handle the communications.
Got you. All right. Rhonda, you have the floor again.
Okay, I'm here. So the project that I was specifically talking about is a 5-year plan. I had to do my own research because I was told by Valerie LaCour, which I'm sure she was told by the DPW or whoever, that it was an emergency repair that closed my street off October 2022 when the DDA, Developmental Disability State Agency, could not pick my daughter up. They do not travel through alleys. So I was told it was an emergency repair. After doing an extensive research, I found out Monumental Paving had a 5-year plan. It was already put in place. Community was not notified. As I said, my street has been closed off since October 22, 8 times with no notification. Water turned off 3 times without notification. My question to Director Johnson is, what type of outreach is being done to the disabled community? The 90,000 people, which is a big number, in Baltimore City, what type of outreach is being done for the disabled community? I haven't seen it.
So let me just speak specific to this project. So in October, Ms. Wimbush contacted me and said that the street had been closed and thought it was a DOT project. My staff immediately looked into it. It was a DPW water main project. We went out to the site because we have traffic control plans or maintenance of traffic plans where streets have to have at least one lane of traffic open. And if they need to close it down to one lane, there are rules and regulations for having flaggers so that cars can get by and that directions can be given so that people can get around. In this particular instance, when we went out immediately to the site, they had a collapse of their trench where they were doing the water main repairs. And DPW needed to make an emergency new trench adjacent to it. And they closed the road, yes, with no notification. When we were notified, I did go to DPW, to their website to see what type of notification they had put out to the public. I contacted that particular project manager and explained to them that you cannot close roads arbitrarily even for emergencies without adequate notification, and that there must be a designated 88-point person within the DPW construction so that the communities have a direct phone number to say, I have an issue, I need an accommodation, my road is closed. This particular neighborhood has a lot of one-way streets. There are a couple two-way streets, and then when you get into the neighborhood, there are one-way streets. Most people who follow traffic rules and regulations will not go down a one-way street the wrong way. And one of the things that we told DPW they had to put in place were flagmen so that they could let people safely travel the wrong way on a one-way road, knowing that they were not going to have a conflict with traffic because the road is closed and doesn't allow that one way. In this particular case, DPW has had to do additional closures, but when contacted, DOT does go out. We also use our street cuts section. They're the ones who go out and monitor and investigate any utility cut in the right of way. And we use those forces to go out and make sure that, number one, they have the proper detour, that the site is safe, and they do have authority to shut down a project until it is made safe. So we do have enforcement that we can use, but we do require other agencies to do their own outreach. And we also are working with other agencies to make sure that they have point people to deal with accommodating and making sure our disabled populations are not disrupted.
That raises kind of an interesting question because you mentioned it was an emergency closure. And oftentimes we think of emergency management as kind of being a much bigger scale. But there tends to be a little better coordination when you're kind of in an emergency management mode for, say, natural or even man-made disaster. Mm-hmm. Is there, and this is to the question about communicating, real-time communication when those things happen to affected residents, is there something that maybe we should consider having the ability to kind of do some real-time coordination, much like an emergency management plan, albeit on scale to an affected neighborhood, to make sure that we're not dropping the ball somewhere, right? DPW has the issue, but somewhere along the line, it's affecting what folks consider to be transportation. Folks who are impacted don't have time to figure out where in the bureaucracy their stuff fits, right? And I think that's maybe an opportunity as we're having conversations across agencies to figure out, is there a way to do some real-time communication and have a coordinator to be the recipient of the information that's fed in so that then it could be deployed out and maybe make for a little smoother kind of communication. Just a thought. All right. Ms. Wimbush, any other questions or comments?
Yes, I do. I did my homework on that too. According to Marco Merrick at DPW, who is their constituent outreach person, he emphatically told me that it was the responsibility of DOT to have informed my neighbors and myself all 8 times. We're not talking about once. The first time was October 2022. My street was just closed off 2 days ago for 2 days straight. It was the responsibility, according to Marco America, DPW, it is the responsibility of DOT to do the outreach because they issued the permit. My question was not answered about the 90,000 people and how DOT is responding and reaching out to the 90,000 disabled people. That wasn't answered. That was totally avoided.
Well, let me kind of follow up on that question. The question is certainly well taken. The 90,000, depending on where they are, we will make sure that that question is in the record and ask for a bit of a response. I don't know if that's going to be able to be addressed in this forum, but I did make a particular note of that question. I would just ask that in response to this specific project, as to whether or not it's a DPW or a DOT question. We have had DPW before the commission. I would ask Chief Kelly if you would make a note that we would follow up with both sides to see if we can get some clarity about this particular project and to make sure we can follow up with Ms. Wimbish with an answer. All right? Thank you. Ms. Wimbish, anything else? Saw the hand go up
I'm
and then the
sorry.
hand went down.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Thank you so much. No more questions.
All right, thank you. Director Johnson, I want to go back to the statistics. When you were calling out the internal complaint numbers, I looked at the data that was presented to us by staff. I guess the question I have is about the coordination when you have these internal complaints. Are those numbers relayed, are the summaries of those complaints actually relayed to the OECR staff for tracking?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that question?
No, certainly. Your internally processed complaints, there were a number of complaints that were included in Director Johnson's report. A lot of the unsubstantiated internal employee complaints, I would imagine these are Title VII complaints. When we were looking at our data from the OECR side, it looks like a good number of those informal complaints we don't have the data on. Is that data communicated to OECR? If not, who holds it? Because we would like to make sure that we're tracking it to kind of help determine, at least from the commission's standpoint, whether or not we're seeing any trends in terms of the types of complaint. Whether or not they're substantiated, that's one thing, but we want to make sure that, at least in terms of the subject matter content, we're aware of what's going on inside the department.
Yes, we can share that information with you.
Okay, if you would follow up with Chief Kelly, and she'll help you to know who your point of contact will be to make sure we get those. With that in mind, I guess there are a couple of questions that I know were raised, and if you give me just a second to pull them up along those lines. Internally, well, inside OECR, a couple of complaints have been in reference to promotions, discrimination in promotions. We know that's often a very sensitive area when it comes to selections and non-selections. But can you talk through what are the checks that you have in place in your vetting of candidates for promotion to make sure they comply with Title VII? And how are you making folks aware of both the process and the responsibilities within it to make sure they comply with law? Does that make sense?
Yes, so when applicants apply for vacant positions for like promotional opportunities, they are instructed to apply on our website with through Workday. And once they are selected for interviews, they're evaluated based on their skill set as well as education and work experience. I believe Nick may be able to speak more to the HR criteria for evaluating promotional opportunities.
Nick, are you still on the line?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay, could you get the question?
Yeah, so I got it this time.
Okay.
Good evening. Good evening again. Sorry about that. Yeah, so Keen is correct. Everyone does have to apply via online on Workday. Depending if it is a union position, meaning Cub or Ask Me, a lot of those, or the bulk of those, are done by seniority. So we don't have much, so to say, wiggle room, so to say. But each candidate and each process goes through a rigorous interview process with a diverse panel, regardless. For our other positions, our MAPS level positions, they go through the same process as well. We make sure we have a diverse panel. We make sure we have diverse questions. And that's how the interview panels or the interview process plays out. So we typically go with the highest score, the highest scoring candidate from there. And if they decline, we go down the list so that it is more objective than subjective, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's not the first time that we've heard that the CBA, depending on which bargaining unit we're actually dealing with, often places certain parameters on how promotions are prioritized, and seniority is one of them, which raises, I think, another question that I'm almost certain that my colleagues and I have from the last time we first heard it. Can you give us a general breakdown? Not asking you to be real precise, but if we had to rank seniority, what would be the demographic of the most senior employees in DOT? Gender-wise, let's just take that as a category. More likely men or women?
If I had to make a guess, I would say male.
All right. So if there are promotional opportunities that are based on seniority, depending on where folks fall in the chart, in the org chart, women who tend to have less seniority would have less opportunity for a promotion if there were a more senior, more likely male candidate meeting the qualifications applying for the same position. Is that right?
Generally speaking, yes.
And this is not a DOT specific thing. I think it goes to the impact of the CBAs and how they affect our ability to comply with federal law. And so, Chief Kelly, if you will just make a note that we have, again, a need to probably have some conversation with the law office concerning it to make sure that we're not forced into supporting potential violations of federal law because of CBA. All right. And then one more question, and I'll go back around and see if my colleagues have other questions. Does DOT get external training on anti-discrimination, anti-harassment? Who provides the technical assistance and support for the work that you're doing in the department?
Yes, excuse me. So yes, we receive assistance from Central DHR in addition to the National Transportation Institute, where they have offered various trainings relating to leadership opportunities, management, as well as advanced Title VI, ADA, and LGBTQIA concerns and issues. More recently, we have an upcoming training this upcoming June 29th, actually, that focuses on our inclusiveness for LGBTQIA rights and discriminatory, diminishing discriminatory practices and increasing inclusivity.
Okay. right. Well, thank you for that. Want to go back around. Commissioner Johnson, do you have any follow-up questions at this point?
I had a lot of the same questions you had. As you asked them, I just said, check, all right, check that too. Luckily, I have some that you did not ask. One is actually a request, and that is, could you provide for us the demographic breakdown across sort of the age, gender, race, and seniority across sort of like either like management positions, sort of how you break your positions down, sort of like entry level, mid-level management. Because as Chair Yeary mentioned, this is something that came up with prior hearings, and we had asked that same question, and we're trying to understand if there's a potential thing that we should probably investigate a bit deeper. And then the other question I have is around employee awareness. What are you all doing to help employees understand the process, some of which is guided or constrained by the CBAs, so that they have some awareness when they're applying? Because some of it could be, it sounds like if I know that there's an opportunity and there's colleagues of mine I'm working with who've been there longer, and we all have the same qualifications, right? I mean, I may have 20 years, they may have 15 years, but the job requires 10. So we all meet the requirements. They've been there longer, then they are highly likely going to get it because you can predict that, right? It's when you know the rules, you can predict the outcome. How aware are they, and what are you all doing to ensure that they at least understand what the process is?
Nick, are you able to address that
Yes.
question? Thank you.
Yes, I can. It is important to note that we are in negotiations with both of our unions, CUB and ASME. We have actually tried to bring new language for seniority. They are very much not interested, which is very disappointing. But I will say for the majority of our staff, they are very, very, very keen and aware of the seniority prospect when it comes to promotions. Some of them, voice their concerns because they feel, as you probably are alluding to, that they, have to wait out other people to either retire or move up. But for the most part, I will say, down to our rank and file employees, they are very aware of that provision. And even if they're not, I have very strong connections with the unions, and we kind of work together to try to just educate them on the contract itself. But that's very few and far between, if I'm going to be honest.
No, and I appreciate that, because having been a unionized employee before, some of it is the more employees understand, then there are things employees have the ability to do that you as managers do not have the ability to do. And then the only question I have, and this is my last one right now, I promise, and it deals with what Ms. Rhonda raised earlier about our residents that are disabled within the IDD category. And that is, do we know, has the city identified sort of where those residents are to the degree that they've have made themselves known to the city, or is there a way that we get that information? And I think it's important because a last minute street block for me, I get my car out, but I can walk easily to whatever to accommodate. I may not like it, but I am not prohibited from doing it, right? If they block my street for a week, I just park a few blocks down the road. But in Ms. Rhonda's scenario, she talked about there are services that her family receives from other providers that are either city or state-based. And if they don't come down the street, then how does she get the persons in her family that need the services, or how do folks who need those services get to those services? Now we're interrupting their ability to receive services. So I'm just wondering if there's a way, if we haven't done it yet, that we identify, somewhere like a heat map or something. There's, there are individuals that may have certain needs. Maybe you break it down by different sort of what that support looks like. So if there's an interruption, there are mitigations that can be offered to the community to kind of help continue that. So I'm asking to see if there is something, and then two, if it's not, if that's something you all would kind of consider.
Yeah, so I love college interns. And we had a college intern from Morgan State, and we gave the question, do we know where our disabled residents live? And we needed to find, do we have data sets that can start to answer that question? And she was very successful in starting a heat map of data sets that we received from the MTA Mobility and from the Parking Authority, who handles reserved residential handicap parking. And we are reaching out to, now that she's back in class, or no, she's on summer break, we are reaching out to the health department and other agencies within the city that may have those data sets. But we do have the beginning of the heat map that is showing us those neighborhoods where we have a higher density of disabled residents who live there, so that we can then come up with the strategies to not rely on project managers or construction managers to tell us what's happening, but that we can work on that strategy that you have suggested, that for communication on a day-to-day basis to make sure we do that. But so we have started that. Love my college interns, because I ask them a question and they'll go figure out, do we have the data sets to do that? So we're very excited that we are starting to understand where our populations live.
And to that point, even if you don't know, there may be people across the spectrum, maybe temporarily disabled for whatever reason. Maybe as part of your outreach materials and notification documents, there's information that's given that says if you are experiencing, or this hardship, prevents you from whatever the language may be, being able to ambulate, transport to where you need to go. Here are numbers you can contact for the city that can help get you the support services or the accommodation services that you need. I don't know if that exists, but I imagine if, even with everything else, that sounds like a failure, to be honest, right? I mean, this Rhonda's on the street that's been blocked for a while, and she has a need she can't get her family connected with. Even with all of that, I imagine that she would have had a much more favorable experience if there was, we're sorry for all of that. Here are some services or opportunities that we can get you connected to. Oh, you missed an appointment. We will connect you to this and get you reconnected to your appointment. Like, just ways that we kind of bridge the gap so that folks are not just kind of left in the dark. And it may exist, I don't know, but if not, it's an opportunity, I think, to do that. I yield.
Thank you. Commissioner Evangelista, if you're still on, if you have any questions at this time.
No questions.
All right. Commissioner Lecce? I think still monitoring. Commissioner Finnegan-Carr?
Yes, just to follow up first on Commissioner Johnson's last question. As you are dealing with your college interns this summer, and I have one of those who finally has an internship somewhere, so I'm very happy. But as you are dealing with yours, I would suggest, similar to what Ms. Wimbush was saying, it's harder sometimes to get a heat map or get access to those individuals with a developmental disability. And so if there's a way, as they're looking, it's easier to see who has asked for accommodations, who has asked for mobility services, because those are visible disabilities. But for those of us who have invisible disabilities, it's harder to map. So I would suggest reaching out to some of our organizations within the city that specifically work with those with developmental disabilities, like the League or other organizations, as you are, as that college student is doing those outreach, because that student may not immediately think of those places. So that would be a suggestion along those lines. But I commend you for not just using interns to make copies, because I remember that's what I did back in the day. It was not useful. So thank you. The last question I have, and it's also related to those, when people are updated of roads being closed, and whether or not, I don't know if this is a DPW versus DOT issue. But when the Harford Road Bridge improvements were happening. Of course, and that was lengthier than any of us wanted as a resident of that area. We had someone pointed out, and I totally forgot about it because I haven't gone that direction in a while. But the right lane that merges into Walther Avenue has been closed or blocked, limiting access. Do you know why that section of the bridge project is still closed, or is that now someone else's issue?
Yeah, no, I can try to answer that question. So the block of northbound Walther between Harford Road and Parkside, it has been designated as part of the Parks Trail Network, allowing for better biking and walking connection to the northeast. And so that part's not intended to be reopened to traffic. And so during the design phase, DOT evaluated different community requests to close both the southbound and the northbound Walther through this section. But after we looked at it with the vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle interactions, the interactions at Harford and Walther, at Harford and Argonne, and Walther and Parkside, we determined to just close that northbound leg, and that would be most beneficial for safety and operations. And so one of the key points of that is that it eliminates the conflict between the higher speed right turn traffic onto Harford from Walther, which was in direct conflict with bicyclists and pedestrians. So that's why it's like that.
That actually makes me happy in terms of recreation.
Yeah.
However, is there a plan? Because right now it just looks like a closed road. Is there a plan? I don't know if it would be on the DOT side or if it's coordination with Parks and Recs to at least make it, kind of connectivity wise with the little park green space that it's adjacent to, so that it does seem as though this is purposeful, as opposed to right now, it's just closed just like it was when the bridge was closed.
No, I understand. No, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a long-term approach. That's kind of where we are right now. So I'd have to check with the team to kind of find out timelines and see what more is to come, so we can try to get more information for you.
Thank you. And that is my last question.
Director Johnson, a couple more questions, and I think we will be ready to kind of do some final check-ins and actually adjourn before 8 o'clock. I was looking at the website and noticing where there are ongoing transportation projects, kind of looking at the map. I found it to be, one, very helpful in one regard, but then looking at where these projects are, it raised another question. We are now officially on the other side of the global pandemic. We know there were a number of pre-existing issues that were exacerbated by COVID. And a lot of those issues just kind of replicated what we've already known as the black butterfly. We typically kind of relegate that to primarily interactions with law enforcement, but we know that there's some other overlaps there in terms of issues. Are we seeing a disparity, or is there a disparity in terms of the prioritization of repair projects, transportation projects that might cause the commission concern from a racial equity, racial justice lens?
I would say no. I'm not sure if you have something in mind when asking that question, but what I can say is that since instituting Complete Streets, and at least in these past 2 budget cycles that I've been a part of in developing our CIP, I know we're having to go through and examine the project from an equity lens. There are certain equity scores associated with that. There might have been, obviously projects have, depending on the project, it has a long life cycle. So there could have been certain projects maybe even a decade ago, there was in the process where it's still here, or it's getting finished, or it's getting full funding. So there might have been some of those maybe before the shift in equity where those projects were already in the pipeline. And so they're kind of continuing through, because once we receive certain federal funds and we're continuing that process, we kind of have to see it through. So there might be some that are kind of still in that pipeline, but when we're looking at our projects, some things are straightforward. Like our bridge projects is very much focused on the condition of the bridge, and we prioritize it from that standpoint. Same thing with repairs of things like that. If it's a necessary repair for a bridge structure, we're going to do it. When it comes to our resurfacing. We have our budget process is where each sector has its pot of money, and then that's divided up between the sectors. Each of the council districts will have at least, say, 3 internal resurfacing locations, and some of those, we will assess those based on the condition of the roadway. We'll propose it up. Council members might review and say, hey, can we swap this one out for this location? And we'll assess and determine if we can accommodate that, and then that moves forward. And then we have our external resurfacing, which is also divided by sector. But again, we're looking at it from a standpoint of what is the condition of the roadway. This one that we can also leverage some additional funding, potential federal funding to go towards as well. And then also, since we have this new focus, we're looking at it from an ADA standpoint. We're looking at it from a traffic calming standpoint. So we're trying to say, hey, we're going through here, we're doing this work. Aside from any of the other utilities trying to do things underground, what on the surface can we do? So if there are some traffic calming concerns, then, we might be looking at reducing the lane widths and things like that. So we're trying to be as strategic with it as possible. I could also say that, of course, traffic calming is a big concern throughout the city. Within the traffic division, they've taken an approach where they're not just going in and investigating each individual one-off request as they come in, but starting to look at it more of as a community approach. So they might be looking at within a few block range and saying, what's in this area? What are the concerns? And even though they might get requests from certain communities, they're now looking at the communities where they're not getting those requests to see what's going on, because we recognize that everyone's not going to have that loud voice to speak up and say, hey, we need this in our area. And so they are being more proactive and looking at those underserved communities and areas where people aren't beating down the door for those improvements. So I can just say that everything I'm seeing is that we are working towards being as equitable as possible and trying to, spread the wealth throughout the city.
And I'm glad you framed it. A couple of things in your response. One, let me ask you that for those legacy projects that may have been on the board before the equity process was put in place, if you can identify what those projects are and provide them to Chief Kelly, so we will know that if there are concerns about projects as they are implemented, we will be able to kind of identify which ones are pre-equity process and which ones have been since the equity process has been put in place. It will help, I think, with our tracking. But the real question is, and this is kind of an awareness raising. Publicly, we heard a lot about the Infrastructure Now law that is putting all of this purported federal money in a pipeline that's supposed to flow down to municipalities, local governments by some process to be able to address longstanding deficits in dealing with infrastructure. Can you give myself, my colleagues, and just the people of the city an understanding of where DOT fits within that whole mystical word of infrastructure, and what does that portend? How do we manage expectations for what folks are going to hear about all of this money flowing, but it doesn't necessarily translate to my need?
So obviously the federal government goes through cycles of these different funding packages, and each one kind of has its own name. So this is the name we're dealing with now. So really for DOT, the benefit for us now is that the legislature went through and advocated for us specifically for us to get additional highway user revenues. So one of the challenges historically is that there may have been this pot of federal dollars that we could have access to, but the city only had this much to act towards that local match. So depending on the project, generally speaking, it's an 80-20 match. So 80% federal, 20% local. And so we didn't in the past always have that 20%. And so we couldn't maybe get all of the federal dollars we would like to get. And so now starting fiscal year 24, there's a smaller jump of HUR dollars, and then the next fiscal year is supposed to jump up a little bit more. So what that means is that it's allowing us to then leverage a little bit more of the federal dollars. So the public can go onto Department of Planning's website. They can pull up the CIP and see what that CIP plan is for fiscal year 24. We again had to go through all of the equity analysis and the rankings and the scores for that. We've also got money coming in from other avenues as well, from some there's like some type of state grant dollars or other money that's coming in. And so we're trying our best to use those local dollars and leverage as much of those federal dollars or other federal grant dollars that we can. So it's really just woven into our process. It's not so much that we're changing things, but we're at a point where we are looking where we're going to be able to do more in these upcoming years. And so when it comes to resurfacing, when it comes to, you know, our ADA improvements, or it comes to traffic calming, other things, we're trying to do even more since we know we're getting these dollars. And so that will allow us to cast a little bit larger net, you know, than before, where we could say, well, we can do 1 or 2 locations here. Maybe now it's like we can do 5 or 6 because we have those additional dollars.
And that's important. I think the communication on the front end as the process kind of emerges will help, I think, to manage both the expectations and, for some, the disappointments, right? Because there's never enough public money to address all of the public need.
No, there's not.
And that's why we often have commission hearings trying to figure out what these things happen. Last question I have is, you mentioned the expansion of the circulator. And you mentioned 2 areas at the same time. They're in the same direction. You mentioned Cherry Hill and you mentioned the Baltimore Peninsula, which is the new name of what, during the time that there was conversation about what that development might be, better known as Port Covington. The question that often gets raised is, who's really being served by the expansion? I just raised that because for some who would ask, are we sure that the residents of Cherry Hill are going to be served, or is Cherry Hill used as the justification for what is really a Baltimore Peninsula benefit? Now, I'm not asking you to kind of comment on it. I'm just raising it as an awareness that we are looking, when we talk about the utility of the circulator as a free public transportation service that focuses on an intentional area of the city that has often created a lot of kind of angst, right? The difference between what happens downtown and what happens uptown, right? That we want to make sure that, and I appreciate your very deliberate way that you focus on equity. I've heard you kind of go back to that frame and that analysis time and again. I would just simply ask for myself, and with taking a bit of a privilege and asking for my colleagues, that you not lose that intentionality around that equity analysis. Because as we continue to have these discussions, and the next time we are able to have a conversation, we would hope that we don't have to look back and have to wrestle with what was maybe a good intention to start, but poor execution. And that's part of what has contributed to the inequities in the city, is that often we messaged one way and implemented another way, and all that did was widen the gap. So if we're looking to go to Cherry Hill, we want to make sure that Cherry Hill benefits, and if it happens to also provide service to Baltimore Peninsula, then great. If we say Cherry Hill and we only get as far as Baltimore Peninsula, then I think there might be a bit of concern that would come from the commission in terms of that equity analysis. So I hope that makes sense. All right. You have the floor now for any final thoughts and comments before we get ready to adjourn. Again, thank you for your presentation and your willingness and your team's willingness to answer our questions.
Yeah. No, you know, the only thing I guess I would just say to sum it up is, like you referenced, Commissioner Johnson, I'm Johnson as well, is you know, I joined the city in September 21. And so I have seen the hard work within the agency. I've seen the passion, the commitment, and I keep telling people, I see it as though the agency is kind of going through somewhat of a culture change right now. So there's a lot of positive things. There's a lot of things we're instituting and trying new and I'm big on trying to come up with creative solutions to things. And so we're trying to find ways of, again, doing more with less and addressing some of the concerns. So I appreciate this opportunity just to kind of give you all an overview of the agency, what we're doing. Also appreciate my team here, my wonderful, illustrious team in person and virtually to support me, because of course I don't know everything, so I need their support. But we're working here diligently, trying to help serve and make things better here in the city for the residents and the visitors of our great city. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Commissioner Finnegan Carr, any closing thoughts?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. No, you've been great. And just as a note, yeah, I've noticed like in 2021, there are a lot of things that happened. You joined and then the ADA compliance division. And so I can sort of see the manifestations of that work that you've all been doing over the last couple of years. So just keep doing what you're doing, leveraging some of the feedback, hopefully that's been helpful to kind of help you all continue down that great path.
Appreciate it. Only other thing I'll add, I know we had that conversation about the CUB, the union positions, but I will say that within our management ranks, we have a high percentage of women. So both in my senior management team, as you see here, our towing chief is a woman, our safety division chief is female, our complete streets manager, engineering supervisor and traffic is female, my chief of staff, so all over, so at least where I'm not constrained.
That's right.
That's right. With that, so the opportunities are there.
That being said, the ratio of positions management to non-management in the Department of Transportation, what is it?
Oh, I can't give you that number offhand.
If you can find out that number and just provide it, it's helpful to get a sense of what the contrasts are in terms of what the staffing configuration looks like. But if the pathways of opportunity appear to be a bit challenged, the real question becomes, what does it cost us both in the short term and the long term? Because I think it often contributes to the loss of talent to go to other places where there are better kind of mid-career opportunities to be able to advance. And we should be able to look at that and make sure. I don't think we have to sacrifice the intent of the collective bargaining agreement and the focus on seniority and lose the accountability that civil rights law provides for us. And so we would be looking to make sure that it's a both and not an either or.
Got it.
So one, let me add my thanks to you, one, for stepping into a role and doing the job. Very often the prefix of interim or whatever that term is kind of taints a bit of kind of the potential of effort and maybe even the expression of effort. We've not heard either of those, and so we are grateful for the serious commitment that you and your team bring to this work. And so I think that passion is clear in this hearing. The questions that have been raised, we will have the wonderful team from the Office of Equity and Civil Rights to follow up. Chief Kelly, thank you for keeping us tight. Ms. Burton and Ms. Drummond, thank you for keeping me straight. And just the final point is typically after these hearings, we leave the record open for any comments and questions from members of the commission and comments from the community. Because Monday is a federal holiday, it is the Juneteenth national holiday, as opposed to the record closing a week from today, we will extend it one day. The record will close at close of business on next Thursday, which will be June 22nd. Is that right, Chief Kelly? You got a calendar, right? Okay, Commissioner Finnegan Carr is keeping me straight. So close of business, June 22nd, 2023. Until then, the record will remain open for public comment. Any follow-up questions from other commissioners? And before I forget my colleagues, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Evangelista, any final thoughts?
No final thoughts. Thank you so much, Director Johnson and staff as well, and my colleagues.
All right. And Commissioner Eleche, I know you probably focused, but I want to give you one more shout out. Thank you for your presence. I know you've probably got a number of things going on. To all of the members of the staff and those that we see online, thank you for your presence tonight. To Charm TV, thank you for carrying this. And again, Director Johnson, thank you for your presentation and for the work of Department of Transportation. With that, the Community Relations Commission public hearing on the Department of Transportation is adjourned. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.